That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, somehow, if you have not heard, I have to do another announcement. We have the Fantasy Flock Network meetup January 15th in Tampa, Florida. You better be there. That's all I have to say. Bring your friends, bring your family, come by yourself. Does not matter. But what does matter is your outlook on Aj Dillon in Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you're going to be buying, if you're going to be selling, and I feel like, honestly, there is probably no better person to talk about Aj Dillon than yours truly, one of my favorite rookies in the 2020, I don't want to say NFL draft, because definitely not NFL draft, but Dynasty drafts, based on the fact that people in Dynasty were looking at a running back that was selected in the second round that had an elite size-adjusted athletic profile, and he was selected in the second round of the NFL draft, and sometimes we are getting him at the beginning of the third round in Dynasty Superflex rookie drafts. But nonetheless, going to be excited to talk about Aj Dillon. Please go down there, drop a like on this video, leave a comment letting me know how stupid I am, subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, and also you can find all our Dynasty rankings over there on Patreon. Not only can you find our Dynasty rankings on Patreon, but you can get into a Dynasty League with us, get into our Dynasty Fantasy Football group chat, get an in-depth podcast breaking down your Dynasty team, and to go along with this, get a Fantasy Flock Network hat. I think that should be it. Let's go through. Let's talk about Aj Dillon. And let me first off talk about why I loved Aj Dillon in rookie drafts. Okay, so if you're looking at Aj Dillon, this was a running back that was selected with pick 30 in the second round of that 2020 draft class. I mean, something that I love looking at from these running backs that are rookies is NFL draft capital, because it tells you so much. And I know that we kind of talk about this all the time, that draft capital doesn't really matter too much when it comes to tight ends, when it comes to wide receivers, just because the different roles and the different value that they have for their NFL offense compared to what they have in fantasy. Where at running back, it's a little bit of a different story, because running back, the number one thing that drives fantasy value is opportunity. And I know people don't like talking about it, and there are a couple different things baked into NFL draft capital. Usually, obviously not all the time, NFL teams are pretty good at figuring out who's talented. Okay, let's get that out there. But B, and more importantly, honestly, at the running back position, NFL teams that go out there and invest into running backs early in the NFL draft, you know that those coaches, those organizations want to force feed that running back the work in their offense, and touches equal fantasy points. It's that simple. It's not like a wide receiver in N'Keal Harry who gets selected in the first round of the 2019 NFL draft class. He gets selected in the first. That doesn't necessarily mean he's some great receiver from a Dynasty Fantasy Football context, because even if the New England Patriots go out there and give him all the snaps in the world and draw up all the plays for him, he still eventually has to get open. He has to draw that target, and he has to catch it. The running back position, you have to be able to stand back there, and you have to be able to grab the ball from the quarterback and run up the middle. Not that hard. You just need the opportunity. So looking at a running back that's getting selected in the second round, only about 10 picks behind guys like Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins, to see what the value you were getting on him in Dynasty Fantasy Football was ridiculous, especially if you just look at the historical comparisons of a running back that has this size and this athleticism. And you know that we got so much hate for saying this in that 2020 offseason. We're going to get hate for saying it now. I just think it's funny. I just like bringing it up. Aj Dillon, 6 foot, 247 pounds, a BMI of 33.5. So he is arguably the biggest running back in the NFL. And I know everybody's going to be coming, Mason, you clown. Look at Derrick Henry. Look at Derrick Henry. Yes. Now, with these measurables on Derrick Henry, it was back in that 2016 NFL Combine. So they're not 100% accurate for today's standards. But still, at the Combine back in 2016, Derrick Henry, 6'3", 247 pounds with a BMI of 30.9. So a little bit skinnier. I mean, I guess you could see Aj Dillon and Derrick Henry coming back to back, and Aj Dillon could look up at Derrick Henry and go, oh, my man, you need to put on some weight. You need to start getting a second serving of chicken at dinner because you are a skinny boy. Obviously, that's a joke. But here you also see the 40 time for both running backs. And you see Aj Dillon, I mean, technically at the NFL Combine, faster. They were the same speed, 5.43, 5.44 at the NFL Combine. And of course, I'm not coming out here and saying that on the actual NFL field, Aj Dillon is faster than Derrick Henry. No, I mean, obviously, there's a difference between NFL Combine speed and real life NFL game speed. I think we'll all agree that Derrick Henry is a more athletic running back, but this is just to contextualize the athlete that Aj Dillon is at this size. Not saying he's better than Eric Anderson. Of course, they're not even close to each other. But just to know that you can at least talk about them in the same sentence speaks volumes on the size-adjusted athlete that Aj Dillon is. Now, going back to what Aj Dillon did at Boston College, you know that, wide receivers coming into the NFL draft, their production matters, pretty much entirely. I don't really care about a receiver's athleticism unless they're going to be a field stretching receiver at the next level. I don't really care too much about their size unless they're going to be, Tutu Atwell, 155 pounds. But what we care about receivers are their collegiate production with context. Running back doesn't really matter too much. Running back, it's more so about checking those boxes. Aj Dillon was a workhorse at Boston College, however, but he did not get the receiving down workload. He did not hit the minimum threshold of an 8.5% team college target share. So you're never expecting Aj Dillon to be a great pass catcher at the next level for a PPR format. Of course, that gives him a massive ding, but that's already baked into the draft price and baked into the Dynasty marketplace with Aj Dillon. Nobody's viewing him as a complete 3-down, every down running back like Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook. I don't think anybody watching this video would assume that Aj Dillon has Dalvin Cook level upside. And a big thing with Aj Dillon is we are drafting him with the thought process that Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones were both unrestricted free agents last offseason. So in 2020, just with some foresight, we are able to say Aj Dillon, he'll be in a prime position to take an elite jump up if Aaron Jones were to leave. However, that is not what happened. Aaron Jones stayed in Green Bay. Aaron Jones staying in Green Bay had Jamal Williams go over to Detroit, get a pretty decent contract, and Aj Dillon just slid into that Jamal Williams workload. And from a best ball standpoint, you love you some Aj Dillon because you know that he is going to give you a floor every single week because he is going to have that workload. But in the absence of Aaron Jones, very few running backs would have the ceiling that Aj Dillon does. Now, at the time I'm recording this, we don't have the official report on what Green Bay is going to do in Week 18, whereas, they already have the bye locked up. I'd imagine they don't play Aaron Jones. I don't know if they're going to play Aj Dillon, but I can guarantee you, if, you have Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones all sitting, and out there you get Jordan Love and Aj Dillon just to play Week 18 on their own. Aj Dillon's come out, he's going to crush it. Aj Dillon would be a top 5 running back behind an elite offensive line in this Green Bay Packers offense with no Aaron Jones. However, we need to be realistic with what we just saw from Aj Dillon this season in the new role that he had in Green Bay and try to use that to project his dynasty value going forward. Now, if we're realistically looking at this, all he did was take the Jamal Williams workload. At this point, Aj Dillon in his NFL career is fancy Jamal Williams. And I hate to say this. We started off this video just talking so strongly about Aj Dillon and why he has all the upside in the world. But to look at this workload, it's just neck and neck with what you had. Jamal Williams in the combination of 2019 and 2020. I'm not going to use all 4 years Jamal Williams was in Green Bay because if y'all remember Aaron Jones, his rookie season back in 2017. Well, by the way, Jamal Williams, Aaron Jones in the same draft class. But if you remember 2017, Jamal Williams actually had more work than Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones had the breakout in 2018. I think it's safe to use the last 2 years that you have from each running back because they essentially played, the entire year in 2019 and in 2020. Jamal Williams had 28 games played. He had almost 8 rush attempts a game. He had 34 rush attempts a game in those 2 years as well. He drew 2.5 targets a game, and he had about 17.5 receiving yards. So Jamal Williams came out. He averaged about 52 total yards a game, and he was kind of used in the receiving game. He was kind of used near the red zone. He averaged a third of a touchdown every game as well, but that didn't make Jamal Williams viable in fantasy because you have to remember, while yes, Jamal Williams was going out there and getting 10 touches every single week, what made Aaron Jones so much more valuable in fantasy, not only that Aaron Jones is a more talented running back than Jamal Williams, that is obvious, but what was more important than that is Aaron Jones had the high value touches in that Green Bay Packers offense. Aaron Jones got the touches in the red zone. Aaron Jones also got the targets out of the backfield. Now, we need to figure out if anything changed here. We need to figure out if anything changed in 2021 between Aaron Jones and Aj Dillon. And Aj Dillon came out, and now, yes, Aaron Jones suffered an injury this season. Honestly, it wasn't that big of a deal if you're looking at the workload between these two running backs. I honestly think that you should see Aj Dillon with more touches on a per game basis than Jamal Williams, considering the fact Aj Dillon's a much better running back and Aaron Jones is older now. But nonetheless, through 16 games this season, Aj Dillon has averaged about 10.5 rush attempts a game, about 46 rushing yards a game, 2.25 targets, and about 20 receiving yards a game at the same time. So you're seeing the carries per game, the yards per game go up for Aj Dillon. Outside of that, you're not getting a change in the levels of receiving production you have. You're not getting a change in the red zone role. That's still going in the direction of Aaron Jones. And we see this in 2021 through the first 16 weeks here. Let me go through and pull up some stats with what we had between these two running backs. Aj Dillon, despite coming out and playing an elite level offense, he was the running back 35 on a points per game basis. Whereas if you're looking at Aaron Jones, despite Aaron Jones taking a step back, Aaron Jones still came out and he crushed Aj Dillon in points per game, and that was because you had 59 targets going over the direction of Aaron Jones, and Aaron Jones came away with double-digit touchdowns, indicating that Aaron Jones was still the running back in the red zone and the receiving game, getting the valuable touches. So at this point, I think we can all say that Aj Dillon was essentially just fancy Jamal Williams this season. But projecting forward, we need to be fair because obviously, this is a situation that Aaron Jones just turned 27 years old. We know that historically speaking, this is the fall off of these running backs. That's why I'm not going out there and buying Aaron Jones. I'm not buying Austin Eckler. I'm not buying Dalvin Cook. I'm not buying Ezekiel Elliott. All those running backs are 1 year away from disaster. I hate to say this, but historically speaking, we've seen it time and time again. I think that this 2023 NFL draft class is going to just completely erase the 2017 class that Aaron Jones was a part of, that historic class that featured, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon, probably another running back that I'm missing. Dalvin Cook was in that class as well. Probably another guy that I'm missing. But with Aaron Jones, if you're looking at the contract, this is what matters. We talk about this all the time. Not only looking at when he signed through, because technically Aaron Jones is signed for 2022, 2023, and 2024. But going and looking at the numbers of the contract, I can pretty much guarantee you that Aaron Jones will not be with this team in 2024's age 30 season. But Aaron Jones does have guaranteed money in 2022. If they decided to go through and cut Aaron Jones, well, he has $10 million guaranteed, and they're paying him $9 million this year. There's no incentive for them to do that whatsoever. The incentive will be a little different in 2023, however, where they're supposed to pay him about $19 million. And if they were to cut him, it looks like, based on my simple monkey math, that they would save about $12 million. And I think you could definitely see a world that they do decide to move on from Aaron Jones in 2023 based on his play in 2022. And I know we're going multiple years out, and projecting this upcoming season is already hard enough. So the further you remove yourself and the further you say, okay, 2023, 2024, what are these running backs going to be doing? You're just getting less and less and less accurate. But what is also interesting is looking at the Aj Dillon contract. Because with Aj Dillon, obviously, this was a running back that was drafted in 2020. So, right now, it kind of seems like you're just waiting in the wings. You're waiting for Aaron Jones to leave so Aj Dillon can have that full-on breakout. But remember, he was drafted in 2020, so he already played a single year under that contract in 2020. He just made it through his second season. He has 2 years left in this deal. And one of those years, you can guarantee yourself that Aaron Jones is going to be also on the roster in 2022. We've already seen that Aaron Jones will split this backfield with Aj Dillon and not allow Aj Dillon to come out here and be a 3-down running back. Now, in 2023, it's going to be interesting. Do they decide to go through and extend Aj Dillon? We don't know. Obviously, Green Bay prefers bringing in their own players, as we've historically seen. But there are a couple other variables. And the one that we need to focus in on, this one is more important than anything else that I'm going to talk about in this video, is what is happening with Aaron Rodgers. Now, really quick, I should have done this before the video started. Let me give out a disclaimer. I'm an idiot. I have no idea what the hell is going to go on with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know if Rodgers is staying in Green Bay. I don't know if he is going to Denver. I don't know if he is going to Pittsburgh. I don't know if he's going to Las Vegas. I don't know if he's going to Seattle. I have no idea where Aaron Rodgers is going to be. But with the outside chance that Aaron Rodgers is out of Green Bay, we have to just lower our overall expectations for this entire offense. And I know a lot of people make the argument, well, Mason, if Jordan Love's going to be in Green Bay, they're not going to be throwing the ball as much. I mean, they're definitely going to skew a lot more run heavy and try to lean on the defense and limit Jordan Love. I get it. I understand that argument. But at the same time, what's actually a lot more important is the efficiency of the offense will crater, and those trips to the red zone simply won't be there. So to look at all this for Aj Dillon, I actually think that Aj Dillon is going to be an interesting sell high candidate in Dynasty. Now, that was my initial conclusion in going through and looking at the situation, projecting it 2 years out. And because I think this upcoming season, he's going to be fancy Jamal Williams. After that, maybe he's able to take over the Green Bay Packers backfield for 1 year. But we don't even know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be in Green Bay at that time. So if we're uncertain that this is going to be an elite level offense, should we be holding out that much hope currently on a backup running back? Now, like I said, my initial reaction was to go through and say that Aj Dillon was a sell high running back. But if you run over to Patreon real quick, let me pull up my Patreon rankings, patreon.com, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so if you're looking at where we have Aj Dillon, I currently have Aj Dillon as our Dynasty running back 24. I mean, you're looking at Aj Dillon right ahead of someone like Elijah Mitchell in the same tier. We have him ahead of Miles Sanders, James Robinson, Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt, Devin Singletary. If you're looking at the running backs that we have, ahead of Aj Dillon, the tier guys that we have ahead of him are Leonard Fournette, Ezekiel Elliott, Aaron Jones, Josh Jacobs, and Michael Carter. And I don't know if I just have a bad read on the Dynasty community, right? I don't know if I have a bad read on the price point of Aj Dillon. Maybe my mind is a little bit skewed because I have Aj Dillon on so many rosters. But I assumed his price point in Dynasty was a lot higher than this until I went through and I pulled up our last 3 Patreon Dynasty mock drafts. And of course, everybody participating in a Patreon Flock Dynasty mock draft, they have access to my rankings. I mean, I'm streaming them at the same time, so it's a little bit different. But still, Aj Dillon is going right around running back 24. I mean, looking at this last board, the running backs that went directly ahead of Aj Dillon were Michael Carter, Miles Sanders, Elijah Mitchell, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Zeke, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The running backs that went behind Aj Dillon include Tony Pollard, Kareem Hunt, Leonard Fournette, James Robinson. Now, I would say, if I could go through and possibly trade away Aj Dillon for Leonard Fournette on a contending roster, that would be intriguing. But I mean, I think that they're in a similar tier because at least you're looking at Aj Dillon having guaranteed money on an NFL contract over the next 2 seasons. And Aj Dillon's 23 years old compared to, I believe, Fournette's about to turn 27. I mean, he was drafted in 2017. Let me pull this up to confirm. But my initial reaction is Leonard Fournette's about to turn 27. What we do know for a fact is he has no contract this upcoming year. Yeah, so Leonard Fournette is literally just a few weeks away from being 27. But, I mean, if you're a contending roster and you think that Leonard Fournette will be back in Tampa, would you rather have a running back 1 for a single season? Or would you rather have Aj Dillon waiting in the wings? So I thought I was going to be saying to sell Aj Dillon, but looking at his price point where he's actually going in Dynasty startups, I mean, it's not atrocious to be taking Aj Dillon, ahead of Tony Pollard, ahead of Kareem Hunt. I'm fine with that. I think that's actually probably good value. At the same time, I'm not running out of my way to trade Clyde Edwards-Helaire for Aj Dillon. I'm not trading David Montgomery for Aj Dillon. Like, I'm not necessarily going through and trying to trade for him aggressively. So I hate to go through this entire video and not come away with a strong conclusion. My initial reaction was to be selling him high, but based on the mock drafts that I'm seeing, I think his Dynasty value is a little bit lower than what I initially thought. So I think instead, we probably aren't going to get the returns that I initially thought. You're not going to be able to trade Aj Dillon for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, if you can do that, go do it ASAP. Maybe you can do it if he blows up in week 18, which he would if Aaron Jones is to sit. But please let me know what y'all think in the comment section. And if you think I have just a misconception about the current price point of Aj Dillon in Dynasty, because I thought people would be a little bit more excited about him based on the flashes that we saw this season. But maybe people are smart enough to realize that, this is not a great situation going forward. But thank you again. Drop a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel only if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. Go check out Patreon. Go get in a Dynasty draft with us, whether it's a mock draft, a real startup league. Go take over an orphan team over there on Patreon. Go have access to our Dynasty rankings. Get an in-depth podcast breaking down your Dynasty. Yada, yada, yada. Get a Fantasy Flock Network hat. I think that should be it. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a great day.